So we are really fortunate today to have Kathy Wolf with us. Kathy spoke for us. In Des Moines 2 years ago, and we had a great time. It was in the summer. We got to go out to the High Trestle Bridge. She often travels with her bicycle. She has a portable bike that she travels with, and we got 3 bikes in my Subaru and headed out to the High Trestle Bridge. Plus 3 people. It was an amazing feat. We had a great time. But Kathy, it's just a remarkable combination of expertise, humility, and ability to communicate. So with that, please help me welcome Dr. Kathy Wolf.
Good morning, everyone. So great to be here. I live in Seattle, and I find myself squinting this morning. All of this sunshine, it's quite nice. I really appreciate the introductions starting out this morning to get a sense of who is here, the various organizations and agencies and interests that you represent. And I'm hoping that what I have to say in this brief amount of time touches on your various interests and activities. And I was uncertain as to how much time I actually have to speak, and I was told it's a little less than I planned. So here I go. I'm going to race through these slides and share a variety of ideas. And by the way, if you find any particular slide of interest or point that I make, this presentation will be available as a downloadable file, and I'll give you the link. It should be available tomorrow on the web. And that way you can pay attention to me rather than scribbling notes. So I'm going to talk about a variety of things. Monica mentioned synergy. The term that I use is co-benefits. That as we plan, implement, and manage nature in the city, that we have to think now about not only a single function, that the tree does this or the park does that, but how do we maximize, optimize the return on investment and all the different functions and services that nature might provide. So I'll talk a little bit about environmental services, which were already mentioned, air, water, carbon, those sorts of things. But then my most recent work is really focusing on health benefits of nature, having nature in the city. I will then talk a little bit about economic implications of investment in nature, and then this term delight. I pretty much left the title of my presentation to the organizing team, and when I saw delight on the program, I thought, yeah, I like that. So I'm going to run with that a little bit. So urban forest benefits. Let's start out with the things that we often take for granted, but are very important in our communities and make the investment in trees worthwhile, particularly long-term investment, large trees such as we see outside the windows, and the range of benefits that they bring. And these things are important. They happen in our communities, they happen in our backyards, they happen in our schools. And to acknowledge them and bring them to the forefront so that people understand a little better what those busy trees are doing within our busy lives. And nearby nature is another term that I use. As a social scientist, people construct different ways of talking about things, thinking about things in their everyday lives. And nearby nature refers to that little bit of green that's immediately outside the door of the place where we work, place where we live, place where we go to school. In addition to those bold, dramatic landscapes of the United States that we often enjoy traveling to, but nearby nature, that little scrap of nature just outside the door is equally valuable. So what are the environmental benefits? And you're probably well aware of these. I think the Trees Forever has communicated these very well within various communities. A term for this is ecosystem services. So we can think of cities as ecosystems, particularly parks, river systems, and whatnot. And there are a variety of ecosystem services that are provided. We can grasp this or understand this by measuring the canopy of a community or doing a tree assessment. And I noticed as I walked around this morning, there's a fact sheet out in one of the tables. And it says, trees are our hardest working residents. And it describes a street tree assessment that was done in Cedar Rapids. So we can now measure and understand these various benefits. iTree is a software tool. Here's the pitch. I work part-time for the Forest Service, a research station in the Pacific Northwest. And this tool has been developed and is now used all around the country, as well as the world. And what it does is, first of all, you do an assessment of the structure of the trees, be it street trees, be it entire city, the canopy. Then, using various algorithms and models, we can understand what are the benefits that are provided by having these trees in our midst. Then, the next step, keep turning the crank, is to estimate value. What are the dollar values associated with having these plants in our community? And again, this fact sheet talks through all of these various benefits and the elements. And probably the most important outcome of all this that I've seen happen in communities that do an iTree analysis is, now that you understand what you have and now that you know what this asset is, you are able then to do a more effective management effort, to put together a plan, to think about how to carry out and improve or enhance these benefits for a number of years. So improved air quality, and I won't go into details. You'll find that moving through this material fairly quickly, I won't provide a lot of detail. My intent is to give a broad sort of scope, a set of ways and ideas and things that one can bring to discussions in a community about the value of trees and green space. Reduce stormwater runoff, so the interception, how trees, the canopy, all of that leaf area, the branches, the trunk, that intercepts water, in addition to the percolation that happens if there are open soils beneath the plants. So here's an example of stormwater management. This is in a community south of Seattle. It is a site that was redeveloped. It was a sand mine area, and it was redeveloped to be a service complex for a county, and they decided to do green stormwater management. And the idea was that the rate of flow out, the water flow off the site would be equivalent to a forested parcel, which is almost nothing. So, despite having a building and parking areas, they have achieved their goal. That site is retaining water, intercepting water, and there's infiltration. And you can see in a short amount of time, those plants are growing. That's a capital asset. That's an infrastructure system that is organic, that is working, and continues to produce and return on investment. So what I'm going to add to this as a social scientist is, we can no longer say, all right, we're putting in this landscape only for this function, be it stormwater or whatever the purpose is. I'll offer to you that we can now think about layered benefits. We can think about co-benefits. Now here's an example. This is a stormwater management facility. Those center blocks, rectangles, are rain gardens. They're slight depressions, water comes in, there's roof capture, water stays on the site. It's to some degree managed by these open water systems before going into pipe and drain. But what they've done here is to create a social space. This is a place where people could come out of the building, sit on the benches, sit and chat, maybe even set it up for a happy hour every once in a while, or a birthday party, if there's a family in this household or in one of these households that has a celebration. So thinking about how do we introduce these environmental services, but at the same time offer social spaces for people. Here's another example of that. This is in Portland, Oregon, Tanner Springs Park, and it's in the Pearl District, which is an area that was light industrial and now is a very popular residential area. This conversion has been going on for about a decade. And again, the city planners decided, well, we're going to try to use surface stormwater, green stormwater management as much as we can. So here's Tanner Springs Park. It's an open holding area for water. Again, some degree of interception before going into pipe and drain. But it's connected to their living transportation network or their active transit network. This trail connects to other parks. It's a place where one can go by bike or walking and move about the city. But it also has these little spaces tucked around the edges where people can gather and talk. It's a neighborhood. They can come into this city park, and it's around the edge of that open water. They've also done some really nice environmental education interpretation. So you see these two women who just read a sign are trying to figure out what's down in the water there. And they were checking back and forth between what was in the water and that sign that you see in the image. So here again, a variety of co-benefits. Bringing to this site not just that stormwater function, but other possibilities, other engagement, other opportunities for people who live, work, play in this neighborhood. So now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about another set of benefits that is emerging in people's awareness as they're planning green spaces in cities, and that's human health and well-being. And there is this body of evidence now that has spanned for decades, and we now, I feel, have critical mass in understanding why green is important from a health perspective. And the story that I now wrap around this is life cycle, that from cradle to grave, from the first hours of our life to those last hours, nature plays an important role. So here's an image representing that cradle to grave, and just a couple of months ago I had a birthday, and I'm kind of over to the right side of this figure. Won't say exactly where. I've mentioned to some of you that I have a daughter who's 23, so she's over on the left side. She puts me way down on the right side of that. But she is a young woman who's making her way in the world. She's doing environmental education in Juneau, Alaska, after attending university in Honolulu. I don't get it, but she enjoyed both places in different ways. But to see how she is engaging with nature as a professional, as a young person, as someone who is very connected to the world by Facebook and other social media, to help me reflect and think more about this idea of nature and health. So from the first hours, and what I'm going to do now is kind of rapid shot here, shotgun out a variety of studies. So these are research studies from peer-reviewed literature, from the scientific literature, that have revealed certain facts about people's response to nature at different times in our lives. So first we have newborns, infants. Low birth weight is an issue. A baby that is of low birth weight is more inclined to have health issues, not only in the first couple of years of life, but also potentially continuing throughout their life. Cognitive development in school. Children who are of low birth weight, it's found that they may not do quite as well in school. There are some circumstances of low birth weight that actually carry through to our health in middle age. So the longitudinal studies are now revealing this. So here you see tree canopy, having tree canopy around homes where the mother was pregnant and just having this passive experience of nature. There was an association with birth weight. A child gets older, they become mobile, oh my goodness, life changes, and they need nature. Richard Louv has brought this to our attention, and I noticed there are copies of the book there on the book table. Richard Louv, Last Child in the Woods, this idea of nature deficit disorder and the need for kids to have contact with nature. Not just contact, but places where they can express imagination, express creativity, work with other people, other children to set up these imaginative scenarios and social engagement and all of that. So nature is an important context and an important setting for all of that to happen. As we get older, we go on to school, and those less formal or kind of spontaneous interactions with nature now are moved into the classroom, into the school building, campus. And I understand that Trees Forever has done a number of projects with schools, and to good effect, probably. Here's an example, a study that was done in Michigan across, I believe, around 100 high schools in Michigan. And so the investigators looked at this is typical, they look at the quality of green on the campus. Is it there? What is the character? How much? Those sorts of things. And they set up a scale. And then they look at other measures. So in this case, they looked at test scores, graduation rates, the students' behavior outside of school, whether there was criminal activity or a criminal behavior. And here's what they saw. Just having green on the campus, positively associated with a number of things that we hope young people can and will achieve. Moving along then to college, here's a study that was done, and they found that college students having more natural views from their dorms were scored higher on the directed attention study test. What that means is, in order for us to do the tasks that are now part of our work, in this case, students studying for exams, writing papers, doing analysis, whatever it might be. We do a lot of that as adults. We do that also in our jobs, in our workplace. And that directed attention takes a lot of effort to focus and to put aside all the other distractions that are going on around us, be it the cell phone, email pings, people talking about the last football game, whatever it might be. To continue to focus is really important. And this is but one of several studies that has shown that having an intermittent nature view is very helpful in restoring directed attention. Another example of this, not a study, but as I talk about these things, I travel around and people tell me stories that I'd love to share. I'm kind of a pollinator, moving around, sharing little bits from place to place. I once talked to a physician who does surgeries, and this is in Portland, Oregon, and he told me that he once worked in a surgery arena or room where they had windows, not unlike what we have here in the back. And he said while he was working, and very complex, detailed work, every once in a while he would intentionally glance up and look at nature, look at the trees, and he felt restored, and he felt that his ability to perform these extended surgeries was enhanced by having that contact. All right, in time, we graduate, we move on, we make a choice about where we live, if we purchase a home or rent, and crime is a consideration. What is the character and behaviors within that community? Well, a number of studies have looked at the relationship between trees, tree canopy, landscape, various nature elements, and crime, and generally find a connection. We don't quite know what the cause might be, but an association, a statistical association between having trees, quality trees and parks, and reduced crime. And this study in particular found a difference between different size trees. So with smaller trees, there might be increased crime. So that's something to think about in planning and management, is that may have to do with sight lines, that there's adequate view corridors or spaces within the community. But larger trees are associated with reduced crime. Maybe that has to do with care. An expression that people are willing to manage something for a long time and produce that quality canopy may be expressed then in their care for the community and watching over others and properties. Here's another study. Emerald ash borer, is it here? Yes, okay. We've not seen it in Seattle yet. We understand it's in the Denver area, gradually moving west. But here was an opportunity in the upper Midwest. This team of investigators found communities where the emerald ash borer had devastated the ash forests. And so what you see is one image, full canopy. Second image, those trees are dead because of the emerald ash borer. Third image, not in this slide, is trees are all gone. They've been removed, of course. After they die, they become a hazard, at great expense, unfortunately. But the team of investigators, they found this natural experiment, if you will. Here are these communities that are fairly stable in terms of residential population. People buy homes and they've stayed there for a while. So here, in a short time, less than a year, these trees are there and then they go away. So the investigators went to the county health departments and said, all right, could we possibly access health records? During this time period, trees are gone. This time period following. And here's what they found. Again, we don't quite know the causes yet. Some investigators are now, researchers are now trying to tease out what is the cause of all this. But what we see is an association between the removal of trees and cardiovascular and respiratory disease incidence. This one I love because I've actually done a couple of sabbaticals in Japan. Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. And this is not literally having a bathtub or a hot tub in the forest. This is about long walks, extended walks within forested areas. And very good research. It's been done over about a decade, numerous studies. And indeed now there are some places in Japan where they're actually implementing forest walking, Shinrin-yoku activity as a prescribed activity for people to alleviate stress, to alleviate some of the benefits that they have found, or some of the conditions that they have found are enhanced by this. Very interesting work. If you Google forest bathing, a lot of material comes up. But look at the range here: lower cortisol, stress, increased immune function, lower pulse rate and blood pressure. Also not on the slide, but improved diabetes symptoms. Again, these are extended walks, maybe a few hours up to a full weekend, with people moving through these forested areas. And related to that, if we're out moving about in nature, there have been studies about mental health, which is becoming quite a public health issue, mental health. And so studies have found that physical activity is associated with reduced incidence of various mental health conditions, such as depression reduction. And so we can make those places where people are inclined to go and walk, to be active, to feel comfortable in doing so, to feel safe, and maybe there are mental health benefits as well. And all right, we age, we get a little older, maybe there's a time or two where we have to find ourselves or place ourselves in a hospital. And there are a great deal of studies now pointing to the benefit of healing gardens in our hospitals. And Claire Cooper Marcus is one of the thought leaders and one of the primary researchers in this work. And she and Marty Barnes just published a book recently. It is the go-to book about hospitals, healing gardens, therapy gardens, and offers not only the background literature, the background facts, but also a lot of design recommendations, if any of you have an interest in this. What the research shows is that patients do gain benefit from having access to these small spaces in hospitals. And hospitals are now taking this, they're taking this seriously, because one of the first studies in this whole thing about nature contact or nature experience benefit was a study done by Roger Ulrich back in 1984. And again, this was a natural experiment. There were people who had gallbladder surgery. Some of them were randomly assigned to a room for recovery, having a view of a brick wall. Others were randomly assigned to a room that had a view of green. Unknowing, the patients had no idea, so they couldn't self-report, but Roger was able to access their medical records. And here's what he found: shorter stays for those people in green, or having a view of green. Less pain. They were not requiring as powerful analgesics or pain meds, and fewer minor complications associated with simply having a view of green. So hospitals are now, as I said, are recognizing the value of this as a therapeutic element within that hospital environment. So here's an example again from Portland, Oregon, Legacy Hospital System. The image on the left and the image on the right are the same place. So they went in and did a major retrofit. And there are some elements in that healing garden. So now people who design these things, they have a checklist of things that they bring into these healing gardens. One is wide sidewalks, so that someone in a wheelchair or someone who's walking side by side with a caretaker, and maybe they have the bottle on the stand that they're walking with them, they have to have enough space to walk comfortably. So broad sidewalks. Notice the variety of vegetation. A variety of interesting things: art, water, distractions, so that one can put aside all of that demanding and sterile sort of things that are happening in the hospital itself, in the building. So, and also that you have loved ones that can spend time as well, because they're working very hard to understand a lot of complex information, perhaps having to make decisions for their loved one, and this is a place of respite within all of that. What hospitals are discovering now and are starting to study as they implement and install these gardens is that the staff need these spaces or appreciate these spaces as well. And very tiring if you're in surgery, if you're on a long shift as a nurse working with some cranky patients. You've got to be on top of everything, the right meds to the right person, various devices that have to be monitored and changed out. So hospitals are finding that staff access to these spaces is quite important as well. And now there's some studies coming along to validate that and offer a little more detail and understanding. And finally, cradle to grave, we're older. There are two things that one sees in the health literature, the broader health literature, that contribute to decline of health in elders. One is lack of mobility. Once we're no longer able to move, don't want to move, we're more inclined to have injuries, atrophy of muscles and joints, so that we're not mobile. So once that decline starts, it can accelerate if we don't maintain mobility as elders. The other is social connections. A variety of studies have revealed that people who are lonely or isolated are more inclined to be ill or develop disease as they age. So now horticulture therapy programs are working to enhance or to offer both mobility by way of the horticulture activity. I'm even now hearing a little bit about urban forestry, tree planting as part of elder programs, but also the social connections. As people come together, they engage, they talk, they share, they eat together, they drink together, maybe a little bit, but these elements of life that keep people together and keep them moving. So how do we know all of this? Well, I've shared really a scattered bit of the facts and knowledge that are now available from science publications. And I recognize that this is not readily available necessarily to everyone. I work at one of the primary research universities in the nation, and sometimes we have a little difficulty running down these studies. So what we've done is to prepare a website called Green Cities Good Health. And if you'd like to dig in and learn a little bit more about all of this, this is a resource that you might find helpful. Green Cities Good Health, the way it's set up, on the left there you see an array of topics. What we've done is to collect this literature, and it's become an obsession. We're now at 3,000 articles, 3,000 plus. I never imagined it would be that much material, but the pace of publication about all of this is really accelerating. So the topics on the left, each of those topics has a page. You see a very brief description of that content. Then there are fast facts. If you're doing a one-pager or a brochure or a newsletter in your organization, you might want to grab some of those fast facts and place them to help make the case. And then finally, this piece ends with a longer narrative, providing more explanation and more detail about the topic. So what we find across all of this, and here's another way of looking at this body of literature, is environmental fitness is sort of one collection of information that we need quality environments that don't have toxins, that don't have risk within them. That's the basics, and that's what the EPA works very hard to guarantee in our communities. But over and above that, there's wellness support, these sort of general encounters or experiences with nature and how they contribute to our wellness. Then there are supportive spaces and healing places, those specific places, the hospital, the school, the workplace, where intentional placement of nature can be quite helpful. And wrapped all around this is aesthetics. And unfortunately, in many communities, when I talk to people, aesthetics and beautification is all they can talk about with their trees and landscape. But that's only the beginning. Punch through that. Punch through aesthetics and talk about environmental services, health benefits, those co-benefits that trees and parks and open spaces offer for us. All right, what about delight? Going back to the topic of all of this. So let me just share some examples of placemaking, delight that involve and include nature. And by the way, how much more time do I have? Anyone? Got a timekeeper? 30 minutes. Oh, okay. I'll slow down a little bit. All right. So by delight, I'm not talking about exciting, again, just as there's nearby nature, I think there's everyday delight. So what is it about nature that we can bring in by way of design and careful planning and management that introduces delight into our world and into our lives? Well, trees are certainly placemakers. Place here, this facility, this country club, these trees define this place. And I imagine in the summer, being around the pool or out on the course, really exceptional. And that can be expressed even in small spaces in our cities. And it should be a part of all parts of the community. There are a number of people who are now studying environmental justice, not environmental justice in terms of where are risks and toxins placed in our environment, but equal access, looking at the equitability or the equity issue of where parks are in our cities and how everyone might be able to experience these benefits. And there are some trees that just in their character, their size, their awesomeness, make place or set place. And Monica talked a little bit about the pine tree that has been a part of her life. For her, that's a very personal placemaker. In other communities, there are shared appreciations, broadly shared appreciations for particular trees or particular forests. And we can take that into thinking about co-benefits again. This placemaking is not limited to where a park is or where a tree planting is, but it can be infused into it, can be integrated into all of the land uses within our community. I live on Bainbridge Island, just outside of Seattle. It's this sweet little community, bedroom community of Seattle. I commute into Seattle every day by ferry boat, about 30 minutes. And our Main Street, the planners in the city as well as concerned citizens, I think, have done some really nice, small detailed things to integrate nature into our Main Street and creating a place of delight. So, for instance, this is just outside of a bakery. And how many times have you been in a community where, yeah, let's do some street furniture, let's put out some benches, and the benches are end to end to end in a long line, right? Who sits in them? If there's a view, that's fine, but you can't sit and talk. They don't become a place. They're just furniture, just objects. So someone decided, hey, let's spin these benches around. Let's make little talking rooms, if you will, outdoors. So the combination of the bakery, that overhang, again, it's Seattle, it rains a lot. The overhang and those trees help define, help create place on a micro scale within our Main Street. Here's another example of that. How many times you go to kind of a strip mall place and you drive up and you park and then there's this hot expanse of concrete and you run across that into the store and then you dash back to your car. Here, again, in an intentional way, the merchants and some design people working with them have created, with planters and small trees, a set of different spaces, a set of places where one can sit down and talk and relax a little bit. Sun and shade combination, make a choice whether you want to be a little warmer, a little cooler, lots of nice things going on. Recently, when traveling in Austin, Texas, South Congress Street is an area that's redeveloping. And there's this about 2-3 blocks of merchants, revival restaurants, new stores, and whatnot. And they have these beautiful live oaks that are on private property and overhang the sidewalk and the street. So they have a built-in placemaking with these live oaks, but they've done some very nice little side treatments to envelop or to surround or to create that place on the street. So it feels more like a room than just a sidewalk that you're walking through. Very inexpensive. These are cut metal pipes turned up on end. Those are xerophytic plantings. Don't need a lot of attention. They do need a little bit of water in that climate. But largely it announces, first of all, someone cares. Again, these merchants care about your comfort and your experience here. And it helps define this segment of that street. It says, here, something is happening. You've arrived and now you're leaving by way of the character of this vegetation and this detailing. Wonderful little pieces. Again, simple design, but they make a statement. But we can also use nature, include nature in big visions for our communities. And so here's the kind of the global look at this possibility. In Seoul, South Korea. All right, this is happening in a number of places where we have either waterfront or major freeways going through cities, common throughout the world. And a number of cities are saying, wait a minute, that space, yes, we need to move cars, but it should be a more functional space for our community, for our city. So for a very long time, this freeway cut through the city, and then major transformation. And in part, this was done for ecological purposes. It was done in part for stormwater management. But the people who did that, again, were thinking about co-benefits. Yes, we need to manage this water more effectively, but can we introduce this as an amenity, as a play space, as the backyard of our city? And look at the price, $900 million, almost $1 billion. And yet, and a lot of criticism. The public leaders who made this happen, initially a lot of criticism. Now, it is one of the most popular places in the city. A lot of activity. People are there all the time. It's a destination. I've not had much interest in traveling to South Korea. I'm kind of interested now just to go ahead and go see this place. Another example from Asia. I've done a couple of sabbaticals at this place, Awaji Landscape Planning and Horticulture Academy. Wonderful experiences. The Japanese have been very welcoming. The opportunity to do a little bit of research and teaching there, wonderful. And this is located in Kobe, near Kobe. And a student told me, hey, you're here, you got to go over to Osaka and take a look at this retail space that was redone. So I went over, came up out of the subway, and this is typical, probably those of you who have traveled to various Asian cities, pretty typical of Asian retail. This jumble, this mix of different services and spaces and multi-levels, and kind of daunting, compared to our American, much more straightforward retail experience. And I turned the opposite direction. So this is like a 180 turn towards this complex called Namba Parks. And here I am, I'm entering Namba Parks. Take a look at that little sculptural feature there, the orange and green piece. And in this image, this is right here. All right, so here, this is about where I was standing, looking in to this complex. And again, issues, not talking about it, though I do presentations about urban sustainability, and of course trees, forests, parks play into that. But this is a remarkable sustainability project. This is a repurposed baseball stadium, all right? You look at it, there you go, you see the back wall, imagine where the bleachers were, and so the city of Osaka built a new baseball stadium, and rather than saying, well, we'll just demolish that, some people got together and said, well, what can we do with this structure? What can we make of it? And as you see, there is still traffic function within it, parking is down below the structure, I'm not included in the image is a residential high-rise that's immediately adjacent on the right of this structure. At the ground level, because of this sort of ribbon canyon effect, it's fairly cool. There are water misters, and with the plant materials, it's a fairly low temperature compared to the high humidity typical of Osaka in the summer. But it's a pleasant space to be outside. But the highlight for me was, of course, moving up through these various tiers and levels of vegetation. And there are remarkable gardens, some of them native plants, some of them more horticultural, lots of seating space, outdoor seating for dining or for just hanging out. Very popular. People, it was obvious that office workers were bringing their lunch up into this space and enjoying a little time away. Parents with young children in strollers. Very nice. Moving through this, a variety, complexity, and engagement. One is drawn into it. And by the way, I did a little shopping, now that you mention it. Not surprising, at the top level there are a number of restaurants, and these are some of the most popular places in the city. To go up, to walk through all that green, approach, have a meal, have a view. And so this is a big vision. This is delight. It really is a delightful place to experience, Namba Parks. And its success is highly dependent on this integration of nature. Horticulture, trees, plants, and to some extent stormwater management as a part of all of that. Here's another one a little closer to home. Someone mentioned New York in the introductions. You've probably heard or seen yourself the High Line. And the High Line was this abandoned railroad, elevated railroad in Manhattan, really not used for a number of years, decades to my understanding. But there were people, those intrepid people, who would get up into it, a few people, and notice that plants were growing. They were volunteering. You know, nature abhors a vacuum. So over time, this bramble emerged above ground, and people started to say, wow, we've got a park going here. And so over a number of years, a lot of dedicated effort, funding, building up the funding base, all of that, the High Line is now one of the most visited parks in New York City. And it is serving people in a variety of ways. It's a place for locals to go and enjoy nature, and there's a number of native plantings within it. It is a place for visitors. A lot of tourists really enjoy visiting this place. But then, look at what has happened, the transformation of real estate around this facility. Hotels, residential, business. It has become the anchor for a major transformation of that district of Manhattan. And property value increase, billion investment. That's not investment in the High Line, that's investment in surrounding and properties for upgrades so that they could facilitate new occupation, different uses and whatnot. So the idea of delight is not just something that is of our senses, our experiences, but it has economic consequence. And nature is a part of this. We're seeing it more and more in cities all around the world, that an investment in these types of places brings a ripple effect of reward across the community. So I'm probably still a little ahead of time to my surprise, but let me wrap this up here. Community trees and forests. Yes, they work for the environment. They provide environmental services, storm water management, air quality, carbon and climate perhaps. But that's not the end all. Next month, I'm attending a conference in Houston about low impact development. And I'm so excited because it's a conference of engineers. It's a conference of people who have to pay attention to the very practical needs of moving water around in a city. But I'll be talking about nature and health co-benefits associated with the work that they do. And I'm really looking forward to that exchange to learn a little bit more about the practical aspects of how this might be done. So human health and wellness, I would offer to you, is another way to connect with non-traditional partners or non-traditional stakeholders. For instance, the medical community is now coming to this. They're looking for solutions in preventive medicine because the costs are, 18% of our gross domestic product is dedicated to medical costs in this nation. Almost 20%. And so the medical and public health communities are looking for solutions, preventive solutions for wellness and human well-being. And they're starting to pay attention to this health thing related to nature. One example of that is in some communities, doctors are actually doing parks prescriptions. So someone comes into the office, they have their physical, they're a little overweight, and rather than moving immediately to meds, of course, diet supplement, whatever, but they're saying, I'm telling you not only to be more active, but here's a prescription. I want you to go to the park so many times a week for such and such amount of time. So to integrate this, to pull in the facilities and the elements of placemaking as a health component, great opportunities. If you'd like to learn more about all of this, Green Cities Good Health is the portal to find this information. With placemaking, look for those small opportunities, the preservation of a tree, the creation of a nature niche within and around homes and communities, but also look for those big visions. Look for those things that can become the attractions and the identity of place. And within all of that, there are opportunities for co-benefits and return on investment. As I mentioned, this presentation will be available. You can download from the web. If you go up to this web page, what's new is a link there on the top right, and you'll find this at the top of the list. And by all means, all the information that I prepared here has been funded by public sources. So please make use of these slides if you'd like, or the content in any way with within your own organizations. And with that, thank you. I'll be here through the day, and I look forward to any comments or questions that you might have as the day goes on. All right, I was just informed that we do have a few minutes for questions or comments now, if anyone has anything. Yes?
Kathy, I'm trying to remember if you were part of this or if you have information on a study that showed that if trees were planted in front of a retail establishment, that people expected to pay more within. So, when you were showing some of those pictures earlier, when merchants got together and had something interesting planted out front, it drew people to them, and people expected that, hey, this is a special place, and I might pay more, but it's going to be kind of good stuff. We deal all the time in land use in the city of Cedar Rapids with people who want to take down trees so you can see their sign. And I'm wondering, if that's if we can prove to people that's actually counterproductive.
All right, so the comments were about trees in retail districts and merchants versus shoppers' perceptions of these spaces. And so the Green Cities Good Health website is not only my research. It represents a community of science. It represents people who are doing work in the United States, Canada, England, Australia, Scandinavian countries, Japan, Korea, a little bit of work now coming out of China. This website, on the other hand, is my own research portal. And here we have nature and consumer environments. And there you will find information about several studies that we've done that have evaluated how people respond to trees in business districts. And to paraphrase that, what we did was to evaluate across large cities in the United States, those over 250,000, one case study of a city of 100,000, and then numerous cities of 10 to 20,000 population. And what we did was using surveys, sometimes face-to-face within the business district, sometimes by mail, we asked people about their perceptions and responses to places that have trees versus those that don't. And the setup is that this is not about individual businesses or individual merchants doing plantings. It's about creating a district-wide canopy. So that's important to recognize. And that, again, that canopy represents an investment over a long time. So if you have quality trees in a business district, it seems to represent to people, number one, this is a place. This is not just a collection of businesses. This is a place. And there are certain attractions coming to a place, the restaurants that you'll find there, the merchants, the sense of care for merchants. Not only that, but people told us that they're willing to spend 9 to 12% more in those places having trees. Again, canopy has been cared for and creates a distinct destination with identity. So what we suggest, there are objections to trees. Merchants often have objections. And so what we suggest is to get at those annoyances, so leaves falling and birds and fruit and all of that. Well, a good business district has, they do work on security. They make sure it's a safe place. They do work on cleanup. They make sure it's clean and a place that there's not trash all about and that sort of thing. So let's include the tree care as part of these larger district investments. And let's see, where was I going with that? So signs, your last comment. You mentioned, we talked about this a little bit last night, that looking at not only minimum parking standards, but maximum, understanding what is the true range of space that is needed to accommodate cars. Another thing that we might look at with regard to trees are the sign codes in cities. We find that, I've not studied this, but what we find is that in many cities, the sign code has inherent tensions with trees. The location, the height of the signs, the size of them. So what some communities are doing is rather than whacking off trees, topping them, removing them completely so that signs are visible, is to bring the sign closer to the street edge. Use monument signage. Use collected signage so that, frankly, if you're traveling along at 30, 35, 40 miles per hour on a street, are you really seeing all of those signs? I think the idea is in a business district to bring street walking traffic, to bring people there, to get them out of the car, to move around, and that's what this canopy, quality canopy, can do. So signage, always an issue, but I think again, not only co-benefit, but if we could look at co-design of trees and signage, we might be able to alleviate that situation. Yes?
Yeah, I'm glad you included the High Line. It's a world-class park now, but it took decades of battling developers who wanted to create hundreds of millions of dollars in development projects and tear that down, and it took the will of the zoning person to battle over that and show the long-term benefit that you illustrated, which was billions of dollars for all the remaining businesses that were surrounding it. How do you get policymakers, like in our community we have an abandoned industrial lake, we have an abandoned landfill that would be reclaimed. How do you get policymakers and the public at large to understand or to prioritize and put it as a higher priority rather than afterthought in having nature as the primary feature?
Two possibilities. One is sharing these examples is the slides that I had is not only my personal sort of vacation travel images, but they're examples that one can carry from place to place. And depending on the size of the project, you look for those examples. In my slide collection, everything from benches within trees next to a bakery to a full-blown freeway replacement. Looking for examples in other places and bringing those so that I find that policymakers and elected officials are often reluctant to take the big step because of the risk. So if they see that other places have done it, particularly places nearby, that's very helpful. The second thing that I've noticed is that use visuals. Photoshop, find a designer that's adept with Photoshop, alter the images to simulate what could and might happen in that space. And those sorts of images can be very powerful. If they're done well, they don't have to be detailed, they can be schematic, if you will, a suggestion, a visual suggestion, and then with a little bit of text of support of what would be needed to do the project. But that's what the Highline, for instance, the team, I guess they started a nonprofit early on, small group of dedicated people working part-time. They had their day jobs and they were Highline advocates in their spare time. But they early on put together some nice little design vignettes so that people can visualize. When you go talk to someone and say, yeah, we're going to convert this abandoned railway to a park. Of course people say, are you crazy? And now, now it's being emulated in many other cities. So a visual expression seems to really help, to be able to show someone, to say, this is not outrageous. Look what this could be. It's possible. Those two things seem to help in promoting ideas like that, the big idea.
Some of the effects you are associated with trees, you of course have not said there's a causational effect. And things like more tree canopy, wider front lawns, things like that can be associated with wealth. Have you studies that show a separation between, say, the wealth effect and the effect from the natural cover?
Yes, very good question, and I'll pull that apart into three parts. One is, you mentioned the causation, and most of the studies, the facts that I shared with you are associations. They're statistical connections. You have green, and then there's this outcome. So the idea of why, the question why, is not well known, but that's the more recent research is starting to tease out why. And the hints are, I'm starting to see studies coming along. One is neuroscience. There are people actually doing MRI scans, looking at green and other urban environments. And they're finding the different parts of the brain fire when you're seeing nature versus a more built or complex image. They're also looking at endocrine, so the cortisol, the mention of cortisol and possible other endocrine reactions. The third is parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So the parts of our nervous system that control heart rate, breathing, all those things we take for granted. There are external or environmental effects, and people are now studying how nature experiences might be a part of all that. So causation and dosage. So in these studies, they're often very coarse-grained. You see nature, there's this response. So there are more studies now looking at dosage. How much? How often? What kind? From cradle to grave? Might it be different in our nature needs, if you will? These are the sorts of studies that are coming along. Then the second part of your question, that I'm interpreting at least, the second part is the wealth effect. And the studies that I shared with you, again, the very brief presentation of these studies here. You know, these studies represent, one slide may represent a year or two of work, dedicated work to learn about this. And in those studies, they attempted to statistically control for household income, community income by way of census data, age where appropriate, gender, those sorts of things, and find that even across more affluent and less affluent situations, people respond fairly similarly to nature experiences. Now, probably the most important part of your question, the third part, is the equity of access. And in the last decade, there have been a number of studies that have explored distribution using GIS, Geographic Information Systems, using satellite data to represent vegetation. They've looked at the equity of where, the equity issues of where parks and open spaces are distributed. And not surprising, they have found that in a number of cities, more affluent neighborhoods do indeed have more parks and better quality parks and tree covers. So cities are first doing that assessment and now creating policy to address this unequal distribution. What that brings up, though, and maybe you would follow with this question, is the concern about gentrification. So what we saw in the High Line was a place where people lived fairly inexpensively, businesses had very low rents, and they have been displaced by the development that's been associated with the High Line. For some people, that is a concern. For business people, certain business people, that's not a concern. That's seen as a benefit. For other people who look at urban systems, this is a concern that you displace people. They can no longer afford to live in these improved or enhanced spaces. So there is now, there are policies, discussions, dialogue about how to make it just green enough to bring in these benefits and values, but not to drive away by virtue of increased property values. The people who have lived there for decades or generations have been there a very long time. So there's a lot of complexity about income, economics, land use, and all of that associated with trees, nature, and parks in our cities.
Thank you, Kathy. Fantastic.